Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. We've got a good topic for you today, so let's get right into it. What's an experience that happened to you that to this day you cannot explain? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I will start. I was 6 at the time and head down the hallway to my room. The hallway has two doors on the left. The first one leads to the bathroom. The second one is the room for my younger brother, 5 at the time, and I share. It is just the two of us in the house. As I'm walking to my room, I decide that if I see my brother, I'm going to tackle him and start horsing around. At that exact moment, he walks out of his room. I start talking to him, and he says he really needs to poop. I figured it would be best not to tackle him when he's on the verge of taking a shit and walk into my room. He waves to me as he closes the bathroom door. I open up the bedroom door and find my brother sitting on the couch watching TV. I quickly run back to the bathroom and open the door to find it empty. I run over to him and ask him if he was just in the hallway talking to me. He shook his head. And to this day, he still doesn't know what I'm talking about if I ask him about it. There is no way that he could have gone back into our bedroom from the bathroom. If it was him trolling me, he would have told me by now. 14 years have passed. I know what I saw, and I just can't explain what it was, and it gives me the creeps to this day. TL, DR. I saw my only brother walking into the bathroom. I go into our room to watch TV, and the same brother is watching TV. Go back to the bathroom, and it's empty. When my grandfather died, my parents were in charge of cleaning out his old house. I ended up helping out a couple of times, and the night before we were finished, I had a dream about my grandfather and is the basement pointing at a spot behind the staircase. It was so vivid and real that I had to tell everyone about it. The next and final day of cleaning, we went to the spot I was talking about. My dad ended up pulling back some old wood paneling and found a bunch of old photographs of when my grandparents first moved into the house. I still get goosebumps when I think about it, and have them now while typing. This happened in 2003. I was sleeping on the couch in my living room. My family just moved, and I didn't have a bed set up yet. Anyways, it was about 4 in the morning, and I heard panting, like from a dog. I thought I was dreaming the sound because we didn't have a dog at the time. I tried to ignore the sound and go back to sleep, but it wouldn't stop. I listened to the sound and tried to figure out if it was the heater or something. But then I heard whatever it was walk across the floor to right behind the couch where I was sleeping. I distinctly heard the clicking of nails in the hardwood floor, and the panting grew louder. I lifted up my head and the sound stopped. I have no idea what it was or what it could have been, but the story doesn't stop there. A couple days passed and I was woken up by my mom in the middle of the night. She came down into the living room because she said that she heard what sounded like a dog get up and walk from beside her bed all the way out to the living room where I was sleeping. It still creeps me out when I think about it. One night about 2 years ago, my brother and I were sitting in our living room watching TV. Our 15-year-old border collie was downstairs sleeping, and the door was closed. We were the only ones home. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something black walk between our two chairs and into the kitchen, about as high as my waist. A few seconds later, my brother looks up at me and says, "Did you see that?" And we both explained that we saw what looked like our dog. We looked in the kitchen, and he wasn't there. So we went downstairs to check on him, and he was just barely warm. He had passed away probably an hour ago. Could be that doggy just wanted to say goodbye to you guys one more time. So, nice story. When I was in college, one morning I walked out to my car and there was an unopened 40-ounce of Old English sitting in the passenger seat. I hadn't put it there. The windows were rolled up and the doors were locked. I was the only one with the key to my car, and I hadn't given it to anyone. My roommates were both out of town. No explanation was ever proffered by anyone. I told my friends about it, and we chalked it up to the 40 fairy. Of course, I drank it. We were moving into a new home years ago. My brother and I were maybe, I don't remember, but in the single-digit age group. And since my parents were busy unpacking boxes, we figured why not run around and explore the yard, as you do when you're young. So we race to the backyard, and when we look up, we see this tiny little gold orb way up in the sky, zigzagging downwards, pause, then shoot off, and it just disappeared. We both ran back to the house and said what had happened, and my mom gave us paper and colored pencils to draw what we'd seen. No idea what happened to those pictures. We've moved a lot since then, but they were both identical. Oh, and we lived near an Air Force base. Several years ago, I was with some friends for a drunk college night at one of those places with go-karts and batting cages, mini-golf, skating rink, arcade, etc. At the beginning of the night, I used a spare quarter in one of those coin-operated machines to see what kind of little toy I would get in those plastic egg containers. It was a little blue ninja, and I carried him around all night. We were playing mini-golf, and I was pretending the ninja was fighting one of my friends. I dropped him during one of the ninja flips, and he disappeared as soon as he hit the ground. Lost, but I don't care. It was only a quarter. A couple hours later, we heard back to my car to head home. I get into the driver's seat, and before anyone else got into the car, I picked up my half-full drink sitting in the cup holder and take a sip. As I'm putting my drink back down, there he is, stealthily sitting in my cup holder, waiting to attack. No clue how he got there, and so he hasn't left my car since, and is currently sitting on my rearview mirror watching over everyone. TLDR. A ninja somehow made his way back to my car after being lost in the mini-golf jungle. Once when I was 3 or 4, I was walking around in Walmart holding my mom's hand. I decided to play a game with myself and close my eyes and let her lead me, like a seeing eye dog. After a few twists and turns, I opened my eyes and look up. This old-ass lady was looking down at me, smiling as I held her hand, terrified. Can't explain it, this one. This didn't happen to me directly, but this is a story that always weirded my entire family out. About 15 years ago, my aunt was coming to visit from 8 hours away, and she always called us at the halfway mark at a restaurant she stops at. She did this, but didn't show up when she was supposed to. This was before cell phones got entirely popular, and we didn't hear from her at all. The next day, she finally shows up. She acts like nothing happened, doesn't give any sort of acknowledgement that she was a full day late. When she finally understands what's happening, she doesn't really react. She just says that she needed to go lie down for a bit to wake her for food. While she's changing, she calls my mother in to show her the ring of dried blood around her hips. No lacerations or anything that would have caused the blood. She goes home the next day, distraught and confused. A week later, she had to have her ovaries removed. I was staying at my aunt's house when I was 12 or so having a sleepover with one of my cousins, it was probably 2 or 3 in the morning, and I woke up feeling like someone was watching me. I looked toward the door, and I saw a boy of about 5 standing there looking at me. He had brown, curly hair, blue eyes, chubby cheeks, a birthmark on his left cheek, and he was dressed for winter in a red and blue coat, even though it was July. He smiled and waved at me, then turned and walked through the door. I told my aunt about it the next morning, and when I described him, she got this terrified look on her face and went to get a picture of a boy who looked exactly like what I had described. He was my cousin, who had died on Christmas Day in 1982. The picture was taken that day, after having suited up to go try out his new sled. They were getting ready to cross the highway when he broke away and ran across the street. He was hit by a truck that couldn't stop in time. I was only 1.5 years old, so I had no memory of him, and I lived hundreds of miles away, so I wasn't there that day. TLDR. I saw my cousin years after he had died, without knowing what he looked like. So, what do we think? Supernatural, association, ghost visit? Well, that would be supernatural. Why not? My best friend passed away almost 6 years ago. A few weeks before she passed, we were hanging out at her place, smoking and watching movies. I was using a mini purple Bic lighter, purple being my favorite color as well as hers. She took my lighter, and when I asked for it back, she said I could have it back when she was done with it. Every time I saw her after that, I'd ask her if she was done with it, and she would still refuse to give it back. She was from Illinois, and we were living in Florida. When she died, some mutual friends, my 2.5-year-old son and I, drove up to the hometown for the funeral, and we spent almost 2 weeks up there, visiting with her family, going to all her favorite places around town and saying our goodbyes. The day before we were leaving to come back home, I wanted to go back to the cemetery one more time since I knew it would be a while before I'd be able to come back. I had my son with me. We parked the stroller. I sat there and talked to her while my son ran around playing. I spent maybe an hour just sitting there talking. It was time to go, so I put my son back in the stroller, and as I went to stick the diaper bag back in the storage compartment underneath, something purple caught my eye. I reached in to see what it was, and my breath caught in my chest. as I pulled back my hand and was holding my purple lighter. It was most definitely not there upon my arrival to the cemetery, yet here it was, laying in my hand. I started crying all over again. She had always said I could have it back when she was done with it, and apparently was true to her word. I can't remember exactly how old I was when this happened. I think I was around 10 years old of age, though. I was on vacation in Kingston, Ontario with my dad, and we took a haunted tour of Fort Henry. At one point in the tour, we went into the barracks of some general. It was a large room, and my dad and I were the last people to enter. As soon as I got in the room, I got this killer headache, or migraine. I immediately told my dad that I didn't feel well, and my head hurt. I said this quietly because our tour guide had already started talking. Also, we were at the back of the room, so there's no way the guide could have heard me. So anyway, we're in this old general's barracks, and the guide starts talking about how this geezer had been a pedophile, and how he raped a bunch of kids in the barracks and then killed himself or got murdered or something like that. I don't remember the story because I was distracted by the pain of my headache. The last our guide said before we left the room was that small children often get headaches when in that room. He obviously said this was a ghost of an evil general or some crap like that. As soon as we left the room, my headache went away. This couldn't have been a psychosomatic response because my headache started as soon as I got in the room. This is the closest thing I've had to a supernatural experience. I'm not convinced that it was a supernatural experience, but I can't think of any other good reason why, along with other kids, I should get a headache in that room. I'm not prone to headaches, nor was I raised to believe in any sort of afterlife or anything like that. My dad and I were in the truck on the northeast extension of the Pennsylvania Turnpike once, coming up to the Lehigh Tunnel, which probably around 1/8 to 1/4 of a mile in length. Traffic is slowed down prior to the tunnel, leaving us stuck to crawl through the tunnel at a few miles an hour. We just assumed there was something past the tunnel causing the holdup. However, halfway through, the tunnel traffic turns into one lane, but awkwardly not as a well-defined passing situation. As we reach the choke point, we finally see what's causing the backup. In the middle of the tunnel, oriented in the wrong direction, is a Honda Civic covered and surrounded by raw meat, as in large chunks of what must have been a pig and chicken parts, definitely not beef or red meat. The driver seemed fine and was just staring down at his lap, making no attempt to get his car out of the way or clean the bits off of it. There was no meat truck stopped, and the whole scene was very centralized, not drawn out like meat had slowly fallen out of another vehicle. To this day, we have no idea what actually happened, and Bill Murray might as well have been there because nobody ever effing believes me, but it happened. The Blue Man. We had recently moved into our house, and my brother and I were sharing a room, even had bunk beds. It was a basement room, and lacking carpet made it perfect for it's your guy's duty to deal with the puppy at night. One night, shortly after heading to bed, the pup started to whimper a little bit. Think nothing really of it. I roll over and put my hand down to pet him. He whimpers a bit more, and I assume it's caught my brother's attention, causing him to look over too. Why the dog started whimpering became rather clear. There was a large blue person standing in our room. It was kind of see-through, but lit. It gave the impression that it was a taller and larger figure than it was. It shouldn't have been able to stand in our room, yet it clearly was. The proportions were off a bit too. The hands went down to the knees and the shins seemed longer too. I remember watching it and getting the feeling it was looking at me. It turned around and walked away. It seemed to take forever and in slow motion. It walked through the open door, across the hall, and stopped for a second before it continued walking right out the basement wall. Once it was gone, I asked my brother if he saw something. He said that he had, and before he could start talking about it, I told him to go tell his story to our parents before I did. I wanted to know that I hadn't given him details or altered his view. Naturally, our parents thought we made it up before we talked to them. Still, the fact remains that we both saw the same blue person thing walk out of our room and through a basement wall. Every once in a while, my dad will teasingly bring it up too. Either way, we both know what we saw. Unexplained scars each appeared overnight. The cause of the scars is completely unknown to me. When I was 13, I woke up with what were apparently 3 large, already healed wounds across my back. They looked like lash marks from a whip. They didn't hurt. When I was 19, a circular wound, about the size of a quarter, appeared just off center of my spine overnight. They didn't hurt. At 30, a tear in my skin about 5 inches long on the inner thigh. It hurts every day. I have been to dermatologists to get an idea of what was going on, and what all they can tell me is that it's just normal scar tissue. So it could either be some type of abusive relative, Freddy Krueger, or a bad mattress. What do you guys think? It was a sunny spring day. 3 friends and I were walking through a wildlife preserve in a marshy area alongside the Mississippi River near St. Paul, Minnesota. The trail was dry because it was built up a bit, but all the terrain nearby seemed to be in a natural state, a floodplain, I think. There were a few small trees, but mostly tall grass. For some reason, we stopped walking and were standing still and talking. While we talked, or maybe while the others talked, I must have been a bit bored. I looked down and stared absent-mindedly at a couple of puddles at the edge of the trail. Water was trickling slowly across a patch of mud that separated one puddle from the other. The far side of each puddle disappeared into the grass. As I watched the trickling water, it slowly came to a stop. Then after a pause, it started trickling the other way. I told my friends, "Hey, see that water that's trickling right here? A minute ago it was going the other way." They all started watching. A minute or so later, maybe less, the flow gradually stopped, paused, and reversed again. We watched it go through a couple more cycles before we got bored and left. Not exciting, I suppose, but puzzling.